Okay, so we start with Baumol sales maximizing model. I already drew the figure so that I don't have to at the moment just draw them again and do all the mistakes. So I already did them. So here it is. It is easier than it sounds. Basically, our purpose is sales maximization. So we need to get to the point, the level of output where there are maximum amount of sales happening. This is a typical TR and TC curve, and it shows that at this particular point, where the distance between both of them is the highest, is the point of Q1, where there is maximum profit happening. At Q0, where they first intersects, this is the point of break even, and here at the point of Q2, where they intersects again, this is the point from which the total cost curve starts rising and total revenue curves start falling. So obviously at this level of output, the profit is zero, and the profit depreciates as the total cost keep on increasing and total revenue keeps on falling. So if we have to do maximum sales, then our purpose is to be at this level of output where the distance between both of them is the highest. The firm produces till Q2 if objective is sales maximization. So, yeah, I think I said something wrong. Okay, so I might have said it wrong. If the firm's purpose is for sales maximization, which here we are doing, then we produce at Q2 level of output. But if we need to have like maximum profit, then Q2, which we can see in the second panel, is the level of output which is required. Sorry if I did say wrong. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. In the next one, uh, our purpose, our objective is revenue maximization. So it will produce till Q3 level of output. So the purpose here is revenue maximization. So in revenue maximization, we will produce till Q3 level of output, and the purpose is quite simple because at Q2, okay, Q3 and Q2 are very close by the way. So, but at this point, if you see, it starts get flattening. So this is the highest point. So hence, for revenue maximization, we produce till Q3 level of output. And the next one is Baumol sales maximization with profit constant. So here, this will be the diagram where there is a profit constant, and hence either one can produce Q3 level of output or Q4 level of output, but it need to make sure that if the purpose is sales maximization, then you produce till Q4 level of output, but if sales maximization is not the purpose, then you just stick to Q3 level of output. Okay, so with this, we did the whole microeconomics from my notes. Let's move on to the fun part, the game theory. I'm not going on the very basic stuff because I think that would be waste of time. So, game theory. We all know what's dominant strategy, but let me just revisit it so that I I also brush up my concepts. So we know there are players. Game theory is any event with defined rules and rewards based on that. Strategy is action chosen by a player in the game. Payoffs are returned to player on choosing a given strategy. Dominant strategy is when a player will choose a given irrespective of what other player chooses. Nash strategy. So this one is quite important. According to Nash, a player chooses the best option given what has been chosen by other players. So player A chooses the best option given what has been chosen by other players. So we have prisoner's dilemma in here. So let's say there are two strategies, confess and not confess. So we will draw a whole prisoner's dilemma. Prisoner's dilemma. So let's clear the payoffs first. So if both confess, then they go to prison for 5 years. If both don't confess, not confess, they can be kept in prison for maximum 1 year. Prison for 1 year. Now comes the tricky part where if one confess, so let's say player A confess and and other doesn't, then the one who confess is immediately free while other will get 10 years. Then player A is free, but player B go for 10 years in prison. So let's draw the payoff matrix. So always there will be player 1 this panel and player 2 has his rewards on this panel. We will say confess, not confess, confess and not confess. So if both of them confess, then minus 5, 5 years prison to both of them. Now, if let's say player 1 confess but player 2 do not, then player 1 will be free, but player 2 will for go for negative 10 years, and the opposite will happen in this panel where player 1 didn't confess but player 2 confess, which means uh, player 1 will go for 10 years of prison, and this when both of them do not confess, they will go for 1 year. So let's go to the thinking pattern of these players. So of player 1 would think either I confess or not confess. So if I confess, then what player 2 can do is either confess or not confess. If both of them confess, then it will be negative 5 years to prison. But if player 1 confess but and player 2 do not, then player 1 will be set for free and player 2 will go for minus 10 years. Now let's say player 1 don't confess. Then what would player 2 do? Same thing, confess not confess. So if player 1 do not confess but player 2 confess, then player 1 will go for minus 10 years of prison and player 2 will be set for free. If both do not, then 1 in 1 year of prison to both. Make it terminate. So given player 1 chooses confess, the best player 2 can do is to confess. Now we will similarly go for thinking pattern of player 2. So player 2 can either confess or not confess. Let me just first here write that given player 1 confess, best strategy for player 2 is to no confess. Because then what will happen is this would be the pattern. But why should he not confess? Sorry, yeah, I did mistake. So the best strategy for player 2 is also to confess at that point. Because if he didn't confess, then he will go for minus 10 years, which is not at all good scenario for him. So if player 1 confess, then player 2 will also choose confess as the dominant strategy for him. Now let's go to player 2's thinking. So either player 1 can confess or he can go for not confess, confess, not confess. So let's say if both player confessed, then minus 5 minus 5. If player 2 confess but player 1 didn't confess, then player 2 will be set for free and player 1 will go for 10 years of prison. If player 2 didn't confess but player 1 confess, then it would be opposite for him. Player 2 would have been going to the prison for 10 years. And if both don't confess, then it would be minus 1 minus 1. Okay, so through this we can find what's the best strategy for them. Though in prisoner's dilemma, usually they choose both chooses confess and hence both goes for 5 years of prison, which is also the Nash equilibrium in this case. Now similarly we have for collusion and competition. So similarly, next we have, so let me just first speak through what are all the related topics for prisoner's dilemma. So prisoner's dilemma is an example of game which has a unique Nash equilibrium. According to the payoffs, they're one. So uh, so the payoffs, player one will deduce that if player one chooses confess, then the best strategy for player two is to confess, and if player one chooses not confess, then the best strategy for player two is to confess. Therefore, confess becomes dominant strategy. And player 2 will confess irrespective of strategy chosen by player 1. So similarly, player 2 can deduce that if player 2 chooses confess, then the Nash strategy for player 1 is to confess, and if player 2 chooses not confess, then the Nash equilibrium strategy for player 1 is to confess. Therefore, dominant strategy for player 1 is to confess. Given player 1 chooses confess as the best strategy for player 2 is to confess, and given player 2 chooses confess, the Nash strategy for player 1 is confess, therefore confess becomes Nash equilibrium. So as I told, confess becomes Nash strategy for both of them. Let me just draw a pair of metrics for the collusion and competition as well. There are two forms which can either collude or compete. So let me write compete or collude. Sorry, form 2, form 1. So compete, collude. Now I don't know why I wrote some values here, but these are the values given. If both of them compete, then they would get 1024 of the market share. If firm 1 competes but firm 2 goes for collusion, then firm 1 will get 1296 and firm 2 will lose and will get 864. Now, here we will have two Nash strategy basically. So, but let's complete the payoff matrix first. If firm 1 goes for collusion and firm 2 goes for competition, then the opposite will happen. And if both of them collude, then they will get. Now, both of them are winning in this case, where both of them are colluding and are getting the major share. But usually that won't happen, and they both would tend to compete. Both would try to win that extra margin, so they would tend to go to compete. So minimum amount of fee which will prevent breaking of collusion is rupee 145, which is plus one than the benefit firms get by breaking the collusion. If that's the case. So this is the whole game. One can just deduce the whole strategies and everything, but usually this happens. So let's go to example 2, game with multiple Nash equilibrium, battle of sixes. So players are husband and wife. There are two strategies: boxing match or ballet. Payoffs are husband likes going to boxing match, so husband boxing. Wife like going to ballet, so wife ballet. Both of them like living with each other to the extent that payoff becomes zero if they are without each other. So if not each other, not with each other, payoff zero. So now we draw the payoff matrix. Wife, husband, boxing, ballet. boxing, ballet. So let's just first figure out if both of them do not choose the same thing and go for the different thing. So if let's say husband chooses ballet and wife chooses boxing, then it would be 0-0. And similarly, if husband chooses boxing and wife chooses ballet, then it will be 0-0. But if both of them box, let's say it will be 2:1 because husband likes boxing and wife do not, but still will have to go. And let's say if both of them chooses ballet, then husband will get 1 and wife will get 2. So let's go to the thinking process. So husband, boxing or ballet, provided player wife chooses boxing. Why I'm drawing such small circles? Ballet. So let's say husband chooses boxing and wife also chooses boxing and payoff matrix is 2-1. If husband chooses box and wife chooses ballet, then it would be 0-0. If husband chooses ballet and wife chooses box, then it will be 0-0. And if husband chooses ballet and wife also chooses ballet, then it would be 1-2. So now let's go for wife's thinking process. She can choose boxing or ballet. Husband can either go for box or ballet, box or ballet. So if wife chooses boxing and husband chooses boxing, then wife will get 1 and husband will get 2. Here there will be 0-0 because both have chosen different. Similarly 0-0, and if both of them chooses ballet, then wife gets 2 and husband gets 1. So given husband chooses boxing, Nash strategy. So if given husband chooses box, Nash strategy for wife is boxing. And if wife chooses boxing, Nash strategy for husband is to choose boxing. So I think I mean to say if wife chooses ballet, then husband has to choose husband's Nash strategy is ballet. In the battle of sexes, there are two Nash equilibrium. There is no dominant strategy. So in battle of sexes, there is no dominant strategy. Husband has chosen boxing match, and the Nash equilibrium strategy for wife is to go for boxing match. And given husband has chosen ballet, Nash strategy for wife is to choose ballet. Similarly, if wife has chosen going for boxing match, then husband will choose boxing as their Nash strategy. And if wife chooses ballet, then Nash strategy for husband is to choose ballet. The Nash strategies match when both of them chooses boxing or when both of them chooses ballet. So both these boxes are the Nash strategies. But there is also one thing which we should note, which is in Battle of Sexes there is no credible threat. No credible threat. That is, even if the husband gives a threat of that he would choose boxing as dominant strategy, the wife knows that his payoff from being alone in the boxing match is zero, which is lesser than one, which will be the payoff if he accompanies the wife to ballet. However, if payoff becomes different, such that husband will get a payoff one going alone to the boxing match, then the threat will become a credible threat. Credible threat is one in which implementation of threat does not decrease payoffs for the player who applies the threat. So here we have no credible threat, but if there is credible threat, the one implementing the threat have not decreased its own payoffs. So in just articulating it properly, it will become that credible threat is the one in which implementation of threat. So in which implementation of threat does not decrease payoffs for the player who applies the threat. Should I go to one more example where there is no Nash equilibrium? I think I should, though it would make the video a bit lengthy, but I think I should complete it. So, example 3 in game theory with no Nash equilibrium. So, the game is matching pennies. So, there are two players, 1 and 2, tossing two coins. Strategy is to choose head or tail. So, payoffs are first is if both coins get head or tail, then player 1 gets rupee 100 and player 2 gets rupee 100. So both coins head or tail, then P1 gets rupee 100, P2 also gets rupee 100. Second is if one coin has head and other has tail, then player 1 pays 100 and player 2 gets 100. So one coin has head and other has tail, then P1 has to give rupee 100 and P2 gets rupee 100. So let's just draw the payoff matrix. P1, P2, heads, heads, tails, tails. So both, if both of them gets head, then 100. Okay, I think I didn't clear the payoff matrix properly. In scenario 1, the payoff matrix will become this. If let's say there are both heads or both tails, then player 2 has to give rupee 100 and player 1 will get rupee 100. I was also thinking all this time that how's this a game? What is happening? So If both of them gets head, then player 2 have to give 100, and similarly this would happen here as well. So, but if let's say player whatever happens here, player 1 will give rupee 100 and player 2 will get rupee 100. So, as we can see, there is no particular Nash strategy in this game. So, the payoffs are designed in such a way that there is no Nash strategy of one player which matches the Nash strategy of another player. Therefore, the game has no Nash equilibrium. This is also because of the payoff create opposite results in adjacent metrics. No Nash strategy because payoffs create opposite results in adjacent metrics. Then we will move to theory of distribution. Just the next video would be theory of distribution regarding Ricardian theory of distribution and all. So yeah, see ya.